What is today's topic? That is written there, but what is the name of the full topic? Morphology, characteristics, laboratory diagnosis, and diseases caused by parasites. What do you mean by parasites? This won't be a one-way interaction or one-way class. This will be both way. So I would like to request you all to participate in the class. So a parasite is defined as an organism that lives in or on another organism and derives its nourishment without giving anything in return, no benefit. Okay? And parasitology is a study of parasites, right? Now, types of parasites, we have ecto and endo. What do you mean by ectoparasites and what do you mean by endoparasites? Someone voluntarily stand up and then speak. If you all together speak, I won't be able to hear. Exactly. So the term ecto and ecto means outside, endo means inside. Okay? Then in endoparasites we have obligate, facultative, accidental, aberrant. What do you mean by obligate? Yesterday, which batch was there in SGD? You were there, no? B batch, no? B or C. Okay. I uttered a term named obligate anaerobes, right? Obligate anaerobes. Yes. Obligate. What did I tell you by the word obligate? Obligate means absolute. Absolutely anaerobe. Okay. So here also obligate parasites mean it can only survive inside the host and not outside. Okay. Facultative, again facultative anaerobe. I have uttered the term. There is no point of teaching yesterday if you can't answer. You are also there. What do you mean by facultative anaerobe? You answer. And who else were there in yesterday's class? You were also there, no? No, you were in today's batch. Who else was there? He was there. He can't say anything. Who else was there? You were there? Did I teach you? Okay. Then tell me, what is facultative anaerobe? I have uttered this term also.
It can live outside the parasitic host body. And it can also live inside the host body.
So facultative anaerobe, I uttered the term yesterday. And facultative anaerobe is, it generally prefers to grow without oxygen, but it can also grow in presence of oxygen. Similarly, facultative parasite is, it can live outside also, it can live within the host also, like acanthamoeba. Have you heard of the parasite acanthamoeba? Brain-eating parasites. You have heard somewhere there is an outbreak of brain-eating parasites, brain-eating amoeba. Okay, so they can live outside the body also. Okay. Accidental parasites is which accidentally attacks or comes inside a host. Like, I'll give you an example. In accidental host, we have Echinococcus granulosus, which infects humans accidentally. Okay, and aberrant parasite means parasites which can live on particular sites and when migrate to that site, it cannot survive. Like Toxocara. Toxocara, if it comes inside a human, it cannot survive. Okay, it cannot survive and it further cannot grow or continue its life cycle. Okay. Now, that was the classification of parasite. What is the classification of host? Host, we have definitive and intermediate. Definitive means where the parasite continues its sexual life cycle, and intermediate is where it continues its asexual life cycle. Okay. Now, there is another classification which is known as reservoir, paratenic, and amplifier host. Reservoir is the host which harbors the parasites and serves as an important source of infection to other susceptible hosts. It is important for the life cycle of the parasite. Reservoir host is important for the life cycle of the parasite. The parasite will grow inside the host and it will also act as an important reservoir for other susceptible hosts. Okay. Paratenic host is where the parasite lives, but it cannot develop further and is not essential for the life cycle. Paratenic host is where the parasite will live, but it cannot grow and it's not required for the life cycle also. Okay? Amplifier host is where the parasite lives and multiplies. Amplifier, the name itself suggests the parasite amplifies within the host. Understood? Okay. I'll ask questions in between. What is definitive host?
The parasite multiply and reproduce sexually, and one was asexual.
What? Sit down. This is a chart where I have written some protozoan helminths which continues its direct life cycle. So direct life cycle and indirect life cycle. Direct life cycle is one definitive host, one intermediate host. Okay. Simple, direct and simple life cycle, one definitive, one intermediate. Okay. Indirect or complex life cycle is one definitive host and two intermediate hosts. There can be more than two intermediate hosts also. Okay. This list is given in your book, so you'll go through your book and then study. I will be going through this list. Okay. Next we come to host-parasite relationship. Okay. So first is symbiosis. What do you mean by symbiosis? Symbiosis is close association between the host and the parasite. Okay. Both of them are interdependent on each other and they do not cause any harm to each other, right? Symbiosis is they are interdependent and they do not cause any harm. Okay. Commensalism. What do you mean by commensalism? Parasites only derives benefit but doesn't cause any harm. Okay. And parasitism is the parasites derives benefit and causes harm to the host. Okay. Host gets no benefit in return. Understood three terms: commensal, parasitism and symbiosis. Understood? Symbiosis is what? Close association between host and parasite. I can see few faces which are dozing off. Please, I've seen you. Be alert. Okay? Okay. Now, how the parasite can be transmitted? Sources of infection are man, animal, vector, contaminated food, soil and water, raw or undercooked meat and others. When the source of infection is man, it's called anthroponosis. If it's animal, it's zoonosis. Okay? Mode of infection can be oral, fecal-oral route, penetration of the skin or mucous membrane, sexual contact, bite of the vectors, vertical transmission, blood transfusion, auto-infection. What do you mean by vertical transmission? Mother to child. Okay? Okay, what do you mean by auto-infection? Auto-infection is few intestinal parasites may be transmitted to the same person by infected hand or due to reverse peristalsis. If I am infected, by chance, I'll transmit the infection to myself again by contaminated hand, using contaminated hand, or there can be reverse peristalsis also. Okay, you can sit down. Now, pathogenesis, how the parasite causes diseases or infection in the host. Okay, one can be mechanical trauma. The eggs, larva or adult worm can cause mechanical trauma. Okay, the eggs can cause, like the trematode eggs can cause mechanical irritation. Okay, the larva, it can migrate to several parts of our body and it can cause diseases like pneumonitis. Okay, the adult worm similarly can cause mechanical trauma like the tinea, which can adhere to the intestinal wall. Next is space occupying lesion. So first was egg, larva and adult worm, they can cause mechanical trauma. Space occupying lesion is like neurocystic sarcosis. Have you heard about the disease neurocystic sarcosis? Hydatid cyst? No. Okay. So we can have cystic lesion in the brain in neurocystic sarcosis, like when you eat undercooked pork. Okay. Next is inflammatory reaction. Now some parasitic diseases can also occur because of the inflammatory reaction that the parasite causes in case of filariasis. Okay. Enzyme production and lytic necrosis. Some parasites can produce several enzymes which causes digestion and necrosis of the host cell. See, this is And this is neurocysticercosis. Okay, this is filariasis. Next, and it can produce toxins. It can cause allergic manifestations. It can cause neoplasia like bladder carcinoma. Cystosoma hematobium can cause bladder carcinoma. It's a parasite. Okay, and secondary bacterial infection. Now coming to the immunology of parasitic diseases. Since you have not been taught about immunology, I'll just go through the surface of the immunology and let you know. Okay, in immunology, the factors are host factors. In host factors, what we see? The immune status of the host, the age, okay. If there is an underlying disease, nutritional status, genetic constitution, etc. In parasitic factors, we can see the size, route of entry, frequency of infection, parasitic load. Okay. Okay, there are two types of immunity, innate and acquired. Have you heard about the term innate and acquired? What do you mean by innate? What? Innate is what? So innate is which we acquire during our birth, okay, and acquired is during our life. When we acquired our life, after that we will acquire that immunity through vaccination or through diseases, okay. So the factors again in innate immunity, we have age of host, gender, okay, nutritional status, genetic constitution. The components of innate immunity are anatomic barrier, physiological barrier, phagocytosis, complements, natural killer cells. Okay. In anatomic barrier, we have skin mucosa, which acts as a barrier to the parasites. Okay. Physiological barriers like temperature, pH, etc. They can act as a physiological barrier to the parasites. Phagocytosis, like macrophages, they can cause phagocytosis and act as a defensive mechanism. The complements, natural killer cells, also play an important role. Next is acquired or adaptive, which is the resistant acquired during our lifetime. Okay, so it is acquired or adaptive immunity is which is mediated by lymphocytes. Now lymphocytes, we have B lymphocytes and T lymphocytes. Okay, so this lymphocytes, B lymphocytes is the humoral immune response and T lymphocytes is the cell mediated immune response. B lymphocyte will produce antibodies, T lymphocyte will cause a cellular mediated response, cell mediated response. Okay, I'll make you understand. See, in cell, now I'll explain cell mediated and then I'll go to humoral. First is cell mediated. So when the parasite enters, at first the macrophages or the antigen presenting cells, the name itself says antigen presenting cells. It will present the antigen to the T helper cells. Okay, parasite enters, macrophages will first attach, or it will come in the defensive mode. It will attack the parasites, it will break down the parasites into small pieces. The antigenic portion it will take to the T helper cells. The T helper cells are the CD4 cells. Okay, it will take to the T helper cells, and macrophages will also release interleukin. This everything you will read while you will be taught immunology, but without immunology I cannot proceed further. So try to understand. Okay. So it will release interleukin 1. Now once it releases interleukin 1, T helper cells will get activated and it will differentiate into Th1 and Th2. T helper cells 1, T helper cells 2. Okay. Th1 will secrete interleukin 2. First, macrophages released interleukin 1. Now T helper cells Th1 will release interleukin 2 and interferon gamma. Okay. This interleukin 2 will activate cytotoxic T cells and natural killer cells. Natural killer cells you have read in innate immunity, right? This cytotoxic cell is CD8 cell. Okay. What they will produce, since the name is cytotoxic, it means it will destroy the cells. Okay. So it will release perforin and granzyme that will form pores and lyse the target cells. It is the work of the cytotoxic T cell. Okay. Interferon gamma activates the resting macrophages, which in turn becomes more phagocytic and will release free radicals and kill the intracellular parasite. So this will go on. Okay. Th2 cells will release other interleukins, okay, and then they will activate B cells. Remember I told you in the beginning there are B cells and T cells, B lymphocyte, T lymphocyte, B lymphocyte for antibody, T lymphocyte for the cellular response. I made you understand the cellular one, now we will come to the antibody portion, okay. So Th1, what it did? Th1 was involved in the cellular one. Th1 activated the macrophages, it produced interleukin, interferon gamma, okay. Th2 will activate B cells, B lymphocytes, which will again produce antibodies, okay. This is the mode of action of antibodies, like how it will work. Antibodies once produced, it will neutralize the parasitic toxins, it will prevent attachment of the parasite, agglutination of the parasitic antigens, complement activation like producing IgM and IgG, antibody dependent cell mediated cytotoxicity, and mast cell degranulation. Mast cell is found in the connective tissue, okay. There is another kind of immune response that will happen in parasitic infection that is harmful to us, okay. That is an exaggerated or inappropriate immune response which we call hypersensitivity, okay. Coming to the laboratory diagnosis of parasitic infection. What we can do in order to diagnose parasitic infection, what we can do? One is very common, examination of stool, okay. Examination stool we can do, examination of blood, we can examine other specimen also according to the diseases. We can culture the parasite, animal inoculation, serology, molecular methods. Culture is generally done for study purpose or research purpose, okay. So in examination of feces, you need to collect stool in an appropriate wide mouth container, okay. This is the kind of container that we use for collection of stool. Now generally when we should collect stool for diagnosing the infection? Huh? Like what is the accurate time of collection of stool? Empty stomach? See, before starting any drug, any kind of antiparasitic drug, you have to collect stool, because once you start the drug, the parasitic load will decrease. That is the proper timing of collecting stool. Okay, stool you can collect anytime. Next is frequency. At least 3 stool specimens collected on alternate days. Within 10 days, we can collect 3 stool specimens. Okay. For intestinal amoebiasis, 6 specimens are collected. It will be better if you people note it down. You will not feel sleepy. You will also understand. You can read it later. Okay. Last bench. Do not speak to each other. Okay. I am there. If you want to talk, I can talk. It should be a clean, wide mouth container. It should not be contaminated with urine. Why? If suppose in your lab a stool specimen has been deposited where it is mixed with urine, what will you do with the stool specimen? Why? Yeah, so urine can kill the parasites in the stool. So we generally reject such specimen. We cannot see the motility of the trophozoites. Okay, so it should be without any contamination of urine. Stool should be examined within what time period? Within what time period? See, there can be liquid stool, semi-form and form. Okay, in case of liquid stool, we can generally see the motility of the trophozoites. Okay, we will be able to see the motility in liquid stool. So, if we keep the stool for a longer time, the motility will be destroyed. We cannot see the motility. So, do not speak. I remember faces generally, so I won't mark attendance if you disturb me continuously. Okay. So in order to see motility, liquid stool should be examined within 15 minutes. Okay? Semi-formed stool within 1 hour. Formed stool within 24 hours. Because motility का तो उसमें कोई बात ही नहीं होता है. In formed stool we cannot see motility. Okay? Fecal specimen should be kept in room temperature, never to be incubated or frozen prior to microscopic examination. Why not to be frozen? In case of parasitic diseases. If you freeze the stool, you cannot see the motility, the parasites will die. No? You cannot freeze the specimen. Okay. If immediate examination is not possible, then you can preserve it in 10% formalin. Okay. But that too, if you preserve it in 10% formalin within 24 hours, you should examine ideally you should examine within 24 hours. This is how you see the motility in wet mounts. This is Giardia trophozoite. Okay. You can see the motility like this in case of wet mount. Mixed with blood, then our diagnosis will be something else. Okay. If there is any odor, presence of blood, mucus. We can also see the adult worms and presence of blood and mucus. We can see in that case it can be amoebic dysentery. In microscopic examination, we have wet mount, smear after concentration, and permanent stain smears. Okay. In wet mounts, we have iodine mount and saline mount. Okay. And there are various concentration methods also. See, this is iodine mount, this is saline mount. Okay. So in saline mount, what is the benefit of saline and iodine mount? In saline mount, we can see the motility of the trophozoite. The Giardia motility that I showed previously, we can see that in saline mount. We cannot see in iodine mount because iodine kills the parasite. We cannot see motility. Okay. Also in iodine, what is the benefit? We can see the morphology or nuclear structure of the cyst. Okay. In saline mount, we can see the motility, and also bile stain and non-bile stain we can differentiate in saline mount, which we cannot see in iodine mount. Now, in concentration method, we have sedimentation and flotation. Sedimentation means it will sediment at the bottom. Flotation means it will float up. Okay. So in sedimentation, which all things or parasites we can see? Heavy eggs. Sedimentation means heavier parasites than the liquid or solution that we are using, it will settle down. So Ascaris egg, operculated eggs of trematodes, larva, cyst. In flotation, non-operculated eggs of Schistosoma, cystode, any other nematode, and cyst. Okay. Operculated is generally what happens. There is a kind. Operculated means a cap-like opening is there in their egg. Okay, a cap-like एक opening होता है उसमें, उसको operculum बोलते हैं. ठीक है? Okay. In concentration method, as I told you, flotation technique and sedimentation technique. So why do we do concentration of the stool? In case the number of parasite is less in the stool, or we are, there is a doubt that the parasite load will be low, we generally concentrate the stool to get a better visibility of the parasites. Okay. So in flotation, we have saturated sodium chloride technique, zinc sulfate, Sheether, sugar flotation technique. In sedimentation, we have formalin ether, formalin ethyl acetate, and formalin acetone. We generally follow formalin ethyl acetate technique because ether is an explosive. Okay. In flotation, what happens? We will suspend the specimen in a medium of greater density than that of the helminthic egg and protozoan cyst. So, it will float up. If the density of the solution is high, then higher than the parasite, it will float up. Okay. Then it is collected by placing a glass slide on the tube, and then we can see it in the microscope, under the microscope. Okay. What are the disadvantages of saturated salt flotation technique? I'll just mention few advantages and disadvantages of one method of each. Okay. Saturated salt solution flotation technique. Flotation technique is not useful for heavier eggs. For heavier eggs, we cannot use flotation technique generally because it will settle down. Like unfertilized egg of Ascaris, larva of Strongyloids tinea, and operculated eggs of trematodes. If left for more than 20 minutes, protozoan cyst and thin walled nematodes get collapsed and become distorted due to higher specific gravity of the solution. This is the disadvantage of flotation technique. The parasites may lose its form because of the higher specific gravity of the solution. Okay. This is the flotation technique where we keep the glass slide and then we will observe the glass slide under microscope. Now coming to sedimentation technique. Sedimentation is concentration of stool specimen by centrifugation. Okay. The protozoan cyst and helminthic eggs are concentrated at the bottom of the tube because they have greater specific gravity than the solution. In case of ether, we do not use ether, so we use ethyl acetate. What is the advantage of this method? The sensitivity of detecting ova and cyst increases by 8 to 10 fold. The sensitivity increases in this case. Okay. Size and shape of the parasitic structures are maintained. Okay. It's an inexpensive way, easy to perform. Fecal odor is removed because we use formalin, and also because of formalin the parasites are killed. So there is no way of transmission of the parasites. Okay. Disadvantages: trophozoites are killed. Then Cryptosporidium oocyst may be missed unless the centrifugation speed is 500 for minimum of 10 minutes. Polyvinyl alcohol preserved stool specimens are not suitable for sedimentation method, especially for Giardia. Okay. This is the sedimentation technique where there is sediment at the bottom, and this is the layer of formalin, this is the fecal layer, this is the ether layer. Okay. There is another method called egg counting method. Okay. The name itself suggests we have to count the eggs in the stool that we are observing. Okay. It is useful for treatment monitoring, but it however doesn't always correlate accurately. In egg counting method, we have direct smear counting method where we will emulsify the stool and observe it on the microscope. 2 grams of feces, observe it under the microscope, examine the entire stool and then multiply by 500, you will get the number of parasites in the stool. Okay, this is an easier one. Katogard's thick film, this is a recommended method by WHO for salt transmitted helminthic egg. There is a Stoll's method or dilution egg counting method. Anal scraping and swab. Enterobius vermiculars infection is usually diagnosed by demonstrating the eggs on the perianal and perineal skin. There are 2 kinds of method. One is Scotch cellulose adhesive tape method and NIH swab. What is NIH? NIH is National Institute of Health. National Institute of Health developed this swab and that's why it was named accordingly. Okay. This is an NIH swab. There is a cellophane, paper where it is scraped around the anus to get the eggs. Because in Enterobius vermicularis, it is not excreted in the stool. It remains in the perineal area. Okay. Next comes examination of blood. Have you heard of the disease malaria? Okay. In examination of blood, we can do by wet preparation or by stained blood smear. Okay. See. In wet preparation, a drop of anticoagulated blood is placed on a clean glass slide and cover slip is put and you can then see the parasite. Okay. This is trypanosome, this is microfilaria in wet preparation. Permanent staining, we can make 2 type of smear, thin and thick smear. In malaria, generally I am giving an example of malaria, thick and thin blood smear करते हैं हम, जिसमें what we do is thin, I'll show you. See, this is thin blood smear, where we tilt where we make the smear by tilting, like we'll put a drop of blood, we'll tilt this, there is another slide, we'll tilt it at 30 degree and then we will slide it. So it will get spread over the slide and it will form a tail-like smear. Okay. In malaria, we can see what kind of species is there. We can do the speciation in thin blood smear. This is a thick blood smear. Well, we will put a drop of blood. We do not slide it on the glass slide. Okay. Next, what we can do is examination of urine, like other specimen, examination of urine, sputum, okay, CSF. In urine, we can find Schistosoma hematobium. I have told you which causes blood cancer. Okay. See, Schistosoma hematobium. This Trichomonas vaginalis. Examination of sputum for detection of Paragonimus westermanni. It's also called lung fluke. Examination of CSF for Naegleria fowleri, Acanthamoeba, Trypanosoma brucei. The above two one, this Acanthamoeba I have told you, Acanthamoeba Naegleria fowleri, brain-eating amoeba. Okay. We can examine aspirates as well, like in amoebic liver abscess, duodenal aspirates may reveal trophozoites of Giardia lamblia as well. Examination of biopsy, muscle biopsy, liver biopsy, brain biopsy. Okay. Next, coming to culture technique. Okay. In culture, we have 4 types of culture media. One is axenic, xenic, monozenic, polygenic. Okay. In axenic, the parasites are grown as pure culture without any bacterial associate in the culture. Okay. Only the parasites are grown. In xenic, culture of parasites grown in association with an unknown microbe. In monozenic, parasites are grown with a single known bacterium, like Acanthamoeba is grown with E. coli. To culture Acanthamoeba, we have to grow it with E. coli. Okay. Polygenic contains multiple bacterial supplements, starch and serum providing nourishment to the amoeba. What is the uses? Polygenic media is used for cultivation of protozoa from suspected patients. Axenic culture is useful when bacterial flora interferes with the results, such as studying pathogenicity, drug susceptibility testing, preparation of antigen for serological testing. Okay. These are few names of the culture media, like in Trypanosoma we use NNN media. Okay, in Leishmania we use Schneider's Drosophila media. This is the name of few culture media. Animal inoculation is not a routine diagnostic process. So it's useful in some parasites like Toxoplasma gondii. Okay. Serology again, what we do like latex agglutination test, ELISA we can do in parasitic infection as well. Molecular method again, you people know. Okay. We can do DNA probes and PCR as well. In other methods, we have intradermal skin test. Okay. Xenodiagnostic method. Xenodiagnostic is where it uses laboratory reared arthropod vectors to detect low levels of parasites during chronic stages of the disease. Okay. Imaging techniques like X-ray, USG, MRI, all these things. If you come up with a question of lab diagnosis of parasites in case, do you know how to frame your answer? See, sedimentation and concentration technique, sedimentation and flotation technique you have to read in your book. Okay. One method is described in each method. You just need to read the process and understand the advantage and disadvantage. Okay. This is not hardly asked, this is not generally asked, but you need to remember. Also, you need to read iodine mount, saline mount. Okay. So this is the framework where this is the way you should answer your while if this question comes up in your exam, you have to answer. So broadly, this will be the heading where you need to describe each of the thing. Focus on specimen collection, macroscopic, microscopic, focus on the examination of feces, examination of blood, examination of other specimen, give examples. Culture, give examples of the culture media. If you can remember the types, it's well and good. Animal inoculation, example. Serology, you know. Molecular diagnostic also you know. Okay. First of all, you will always write in this pattern and then you start describing. Anything? Any question? Anything you want to know? Study this topic from your book today itself. You will remember. Otherwise, you will forget.